Experiences, what did you notice?
It was so interesting. It was so interesting that because it was in silence and there were no other verbal cues, no other cues, how immediately I went to all my core injuries. I mean, there they were.
Thank you.
This was interesting to me because I first did it with Michael, and we've been together 30 years. So I gave him a behavior, and to him, he interpreted it as me being angry with him. And then I did it with Lainey. I did the same thing. She interpreted it as I looked bored, which was really different. So what's wrong with him?
Anybody else?
I thought it was interesting that even though I knew we were making this up, there was no relationship that we were talking about or showing, that it still did create that physical reaction just to see the body language of another person.
It's visceral, yeah.
I'm the potential client, and so maybe have an insight that I experienced that I could share with you. That is that in the context, the client is always aware that the therapist is not a loving friend. There's a reservation there. There's always this slight reservation, yes. That you're there to find out more about me and to straighten me out. And I'm like the light bulb somebody told me about. I'm willing to be turned.
My favorite part was being the catalyst, which was the person who was evoking the feelings. But here's what the interesting part about that was for me. What I did was I held an image of what I would use as that expression. So, for instance, with my partner Hal, where is he? There he is. Had an awesome experience with him. So what I thought in my mind was pain, and how would I express that on my face? But his interpretation was everything other than that. So immediately you got to see how you can unconsciously trigger other people's material with nonverbal communication. And just how powerful are we as catalysts in the world no matter what? I think for myself, what I'll probably do is start videotaping myself, because who knows how many of these things that I do, unconsciously. But I want to thank you very much for the presentation of the workshop today. It was valuable. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I just had a thought about working with all of our clients. Actually, Maurice inspired this thought, that we could model this in our mirroring, or because we think we know what our clients are feeling by the way that they look. But if we were to say, I'm fantasizing because of your, the way what you're doing with your eyes and your mouth, blah, blah, blah. We could teach this, yeah.
I'm so glad you said that, because that's what we do all the time. Because we use the body not so much, I'm always saying to my clients, I imagine right now that you might be feeling that way. Are you? And it's so helpful. It's such a great mirroring. Instead of, well, you are. You don't know they are.
Right.
I loved what you said. I've never heard anybody quite say it that eloquently, that no matter what you think you're doing, the other person's picking up whatever they're picking up, right?
That's yours.
Anybody else?
I have a question. Do you ever use that particular exercise with your couples to try and help them sort of see how they could be misinterpreting body language and expression?
Want to answer it?
You go.
Yes, and the other place I really use it is in group. Because in group, there's so much of this misattunement going on that people don't understand. And if I do it more than once, like you guys got to do it with 2 different people, you will every once in a while find out that somebody's context is so negative that no matter who they're working with, their interpretation is negative. And for them to find that out is hugely important. For you as a therapist to know that is hugely important. Anything else?
I remember I once threw a client out of the office. Now, this didn't happen immediately. This happened after weeks of them rejecting what it was that I was trying to do. But I think this would have helped me if I could have said what I see, what I hear, what I taste, what I touch, what I smell, and what I'm making up. Or in Imago, we say the story that I'm telling myself about what you're doing. And then I could have said, this is what I'm feeling. I'm feeling so rejected and angry and hurt. And what I want to do is I want to throw you out of my office. That might have been a better outcome.
But let me check it out first. Yeah, I think that's really important, that we remember that we're not immune as therapists to making assumptions. And so much of our training is being interpretive or, trusting our intuition, and, that's all great. But we still need to make that space for this other person that's in the room, right?
So the other thing there is, what did you mean by this? What do you mean when you act this way with me? I love to tell the story right now that when I first learned the body knot, I had a teenager. And anybody who's raised a teenager knows that they spend a lot of time misinterpreting you. And they're sure they know. So even though I didn't sit down and teach her this, which she would have refused to do, instead, what I did is she'd get mad at me about something, and I'd say, wait a minute, what did you think I meant when I said that? Well, you meant blah, blah, blah. I know you meant that. And I'd say, well, I can see why you think that, but that actually isn't what I meant. And there were a lot of arguments that just got ameliorated right then without her understanding what I was doing, but me understanding what I was doing to help her. And you had a question? And somebody back here.
So I'm hearing you speak to the individual member of a group. You said that they would become very negative, but I'm kind of curious to know, when you're doing the body knot, do you also have a collective consciousness or a group consciousness body knot as well as an individual?
Do you want to respond or me?
Well, I would respond in this way. Almost every group has some kind of a consciousness that is being generated by who's in the group. And so, yes, we definitely speak to that too. We don't necessarily speak to that in this kind of a way, but we speak to what's the shadow, what's coming up, what's the issue that isn't being spoken in this group. And when one person is carrying that, is that what you mean? Am I?
No.
Okay.
I'm asking, in this templated model,
Yeah.
how would you address a group consciousness body knot?
Well, okay, I thought I was explaining that maybe one person's holding the shadow, and a lot of people are also in that body knot with them. The group's getting split in some way. If we work with 1 or 2 people, very often a lot of people feel relieved. Does that make sense? Can you think of a way to
Nope.
share?
That's a great question. I think it's something I want to sit with, actually. What I'm aware of is the group usually has a context.
Yeah.
It has a group context. So there's a lot of things that can go underground based on what's happened in the group. So that can be addressed and brought to the surface with this. And usually when we have a new member come in, it's really rich because we can have them do the knot around what it's like coming in and what they're seeing and what they're interpreting it to mean. Because some of the group members have become numb to certain rules. They're not aware of it anymore. I don't know if that addresses what you're saying, but as far as the group consciousness, I'm not.
Yeah, another thing I want to mention along those lines is when we work with a group, we start with a sociogram, which is part of the group consciousness. Who knows who, who's close, who's not close, who's in, who's out. So we start that way. And that brings the group consciousness up. Does that make sense? And so if everybody knows that, then we can use the body knot with individuals.
So
Somebody over here.
there's a couple of them. Yeah.
Okay. I think you're next.
I think my question might have been somewhat related to the last question, as I lead a lot of process groups, and I guess I found myself wondering, when you're leading a process group, if you two do that, if you do the body knot, and if when you keep saying you do the body knot, is all you mean is this exercise around nonverbals?
No, this.
Okay.
This is the body knot.
Okay. And so when you do it in a group process situation, do you facilitate two people doing it in the middle of the room? Or are you having people break up into groups like we did separately and do it in dyads?
No, it's definitely a group
In a fishbowl.
process,
Two people
but
do-
we have one person do it at a time because their knot is their knot. So if we have two people that are in a fight, for example, we have one person work what's happening for them in the middle of the group. Then when they're done, the other person can work their knot. It's a way to separate it.
I guess I find myself wondering if the two of you might be willing to do a demo so we can see how you do this in a broader context as opposed to this little nonverbal exercise, which was great, but it's very contained.
Yeah, this exercise is only separating the first two pieces of the body knot here. So the exercise, you look confused?
No.
Okay, all right. What?
Yes, what we did
Yeah.
when we started is how we would do it. What she's asking for is an example.
Right.
Let's get a couple more questions and then we can see if there's time.
Okay, I was the other hand in the back here. What I wanted to kind of express the experience was in being the person showing the emotions non-verbally. There was, one of them was anger, and it was, and I realized as I was showing it, it was progressively getting more and more intense and stronger and stronger. And historically, it goes back to my past and how I experienced my mother with this kind of rage in her eyes. And what was interesting in the feedback I got was that they almost broke down that trigger that I had with my mother by their experiencing wanting to help me. Versus, and I kept saying, well, you were frightened of me or anything. No, we wanted to help you in different ways. Those were the words. And it had a very definite visceral intake of experiencing that anger in a much different way. So my question, I guess, then is this a part of what happens as you're working with the group? It seems like this would be the experiential part of it.
That's it.
Okay.
The other thing we're trying to teach a person is not to get so activated. Just listen. Keep that person in their context. Let them be there. Be interested in them. Be curious. And when that happens, the other person that is activated really calms down.
Yeah.
Did you? Yeah. Your voice isn't going to be on the...
You're next.
Okay. I had one thought, and I thought your question about the collective consciousness of a group was really thought-provoking, and I wanted to throw it your way and see what you thought. When we work with groups, we're typically working with some specific population, whether it's for drug treatment or anger management or men's group or women's group or eating disorder, what have you. And there probably will be some set of beliefs that's common within that group, or maybe more accurately, a set of reactions that's common within that group. I work doing outpatient drug treatment with people referred through criminal justice, and so many of these people had lived in communities where they were under threat and where their social standing was extremely important. And so they all had beliefs that were very different from mine, and so I noticed that if someone gave them, quote, stink eye going down the street, it was crucial that they defend that, which could result in felony assault, but it was worth it.
Right.
And that was what was true to them. And so processing their collective consciousness of what it means, what they saw on that person's face, and then what could be different.
Right.
Seems like it would be a really powerful thing. They would have to get very practiced at this first within themselves and within the group, but maybe then doing that collective consciousness exercise would broaden perspective. I think that could work for any group that is marginalized.
That sounds great. Yeah.
I think you bring up a good point, that each person has to know how to do it to be able to make any change in the larger group. And that's why this group that we keep going back to, who are professional therapists, it really works for them because they each have responsibility and know how to work this now. So they work between each other when we're not there, and they work between each other when we are there. So we show them, and then they go out and have 3 more days together without us.
When I was doing the exercise, we kind of did one position at a time to explore them, kind of get to know them. And so I'm really puzzled how you get the twister effect, because wouldn't people just be moving from one position to another, or?
Just to clarify, the exercise we had you guys do is not the body knot. Is that what you're referring to? Because this is the body knot. The exercise was just a way to separate the first one and the second one. Okay? So you're not doing positions, you're just having people move literally to wherever they're speaking from on the knot. Is anybody else having confusion about that? Who said yeah?
Because I think I want to, is this what you meant? Because you made a reference to it can get like twisted because you're all
Yes, and I mean the knot.
Because there is a jumping, like instead of going through the process, instead of analyzing, you're jumping to action. So you can get all twisted up, right? That's what you were referring to with the twister effect.
Right.
So, Hojima, is that when she used the word twister effect? Yeah. So that's really, does that help? Because, I mean, because it seems like we will literally have to methodically help people understand you've got to get through all of this in a way that enables you. And if you jump over, hey, not a surprise, you're going to start tying up a knot. If you've gone ahead, you can come back, but you have to come back to the sequence.
Right. And
in order
you're
to
gonna,
really be effective.
If you jump, you're going to be confused. You know that experience when you're in an argument with somebody and you're like, what the hell's going on here? If you're confused about what's happening, you're in a knot. And going through these steps will unravel it. So, does that help? And, you know, Twister, I'm just, you know, making fun. It's not really like the game Twister.
Well, I think it would be, I just want to share a couple of imaginings. When you just speak about a knot, does a knot mean that we were tied up really tightly? Is context only going back to our personal background, or is there the imaginal knot, you know, that we start with? For instance, I mean, how does a knot form? How does it begin? in my own mind, I think, for instance, of a bowline. No matter how tight you pull that, if you tie a knot as a bowline, there's always a loop that loosens. Mythologically, there's a Gordian, knot. So the whole presentation, in a way, has this imagining of, the knot there. Now, the unraveling of the knot is, analysis has its etymological origin in lysis, which means a loosening of, of the knot. So I'm just noticing in myself that there's a place to play with
The symbolism.
the symbolism of your whole, presentation. And if we were to imagine all the different kinds of knots, that we have, where is that place, for instance, in a bowline that begins to loosen, the process? And isn't this essentially a loosening, process that we're talking about? Anyway, I just wanted to share that.
I think that's the problem with experiential work, is talking about it doesn't really, you don't really get it. So we can't, I don't know that we have time. Yeah.
So are you following a particular order, or
It's numbered, but you don't have to follow it. It's easier to follow it that way when you're learning it, but sometimes when people get going, they jump around. She asked if we're following a particular order, and it is numbered. I think it's easier to go that way when you're first learning it, but people do jump. They'll be over here in their impulse, I just want to divorce, right? I don't know. I forgot what I was saying.
Oh, you were saying that people jump to action.
Right, so you might be back here in your impulse when it's like, well, if you hadn't, criticized me, so we want them to move to where they jump to, and that's when it gets out of order.
So is it Charles? Was he following the order or just doing his own random?
Well, he was on context, and then he named the fact, which was that he's going to die. Then he named his fantasy, which is that he won't be able to move. Do what I mean?
So he was following an order.
Okay.
Then he went to feelings. He didn't really go to his impulse that much because he started to unravel right there. I mean, I didn't mean that to sound like that.
Oh my God.
I knew that would happen.
Now he needs to do a body knot with Kitty about unraveling. So you can imagine that our clients, when they learn this, they can come in and do a body knot with us. When you said last time, blah, blah, what did you mean? What we're going to try to teach them is to say it in the moment. Wait a minute, what did you mean by that? We're going to try to teach them to say that with their partner. Wait a minute, what did you mean by that? Okay? Makes a huge difference. You don't go further if you will do that. And if you trust the other person. So one, you have to trust yourself, and you have to trust the other person. And you have to look at your context to figure that out.
I just wanted to name that Teresa and I teach a lot of different somatic workshops and intensives and couples and all that stuff using somatics. And I just wanted to mention that. But and you can sign the email list over there if you want to be on our email. But in the process of teaching together a lot, we use the body knot a lot because, those of you who have been co-leaders or raised kids together, it's challenging. And we sometimes misinterpret each other or make assumptions, and we're able to, work it through together really easily, with the knot. Any other questions or needs or comments? Where's the mic? You're bogarting the mic.
What made you decide to call this the body knot?
That's important.
I was trained in Bodynamic Analysis, and actually they came up with this, and they called it the knot because of the way people would get tied up. And so they appreciated the tying up and the untying of whatever knot it is as being a way to call it something different than just a communication process, for instance.
And the part about the body.
Oh, well, that's because the body's so integral. It's a somatic training, and as you saw today, all you did was change your physical position. So it's not only words that the other person says, but it's how the other person looks and what your background is, your context around both words and body.
I also want to just say that, you know, you guys have probably seen other communication models where you break it down and you're using, you know, like I think, is it Susan Campbell wrote that book, Getting Real, about how to use what you're assuming as a mindfulness practice. And all those are great. What makes this more somatic is that we've literally got it laid out. We're going deep into the body sensations, the core wounds, and the way I look at it is because we literally make people move to different places when they move in their mind. Anything else?
Is there any part of the work that you do where you're actually touching people?
Oh, God, yes.
Okay.
This is really the least somatic thing we do. We teach a 2-day course on using somatics with couples. It's really fun because you don't have to be trained in how to use touch appropriately because you're having them do it with each other, and there's lots of exercises that we teach that help secure the bond. That couples can do together. We also teach, what else? Oh, somatics and supervision. And we teach an intensive 14-day training on how to use somatics in therapy, how to be a somatic psychotherapist.
There's a lot of touch in that.
Yeah. Anybody else?
I just want to say the last thing about when we're using this with an individual or even a couple, we will come up and touch somebody, help them ground, support their back. You know, so we do use it as we work this knot.
Also, in our groups, we work our groups somatically, and we have them bring in people from the group to support them when they're doing the work. Are we done?
I think so. Looks like it's time.
Well, I just want to thank all of you guys. You've been great, and it's been a pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.